Great.
Welcome, everybody, coming here for the celebration of life for Stewart Clark Kinner, aka Stewart, aka Stewie. Some people called him, let me get this right, Elvor, for those of his gaming buddies who he hung out with a lot. Elvor? Yeah, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everybody who's joining us online for the stream and joining us by way of YouTube Live. For your info, the link is going to be recorded and it will be sent out later so people can watch it later as well. So the program is going to be as follows. We're going to start out with a eulogy by Jamie Judd, who's Stewart's father-in-law, Rachel's dad. By the way, I'm Rachel's mom. Rachel then's going to give us some remarks, and she's going to give also some memories of Stewart. And at that point, we're going to turn it over to share a few thoughts. Now, those of you who are online, please be free to go onto the chat feature and to share some thoughts and some memories about Stewart that Rachel can read later, and it can be part of everything. So feel free to do that. Since we are streaming live, we're going to have anybody who is coming up to share anything, we're going to have them come here and stand at the podium since we're on camera. So we'll turn the time over to Jamie.
Hello, everyone. This was written by Rachel, so I can't take any credit for this. So she did a wonderful job. So let's talk about Stewart during his celebration of life. Stewart Clark Kinner. On June 11, 1957, Stewart was born to parents Nancy Scott Stewart and Floyd Edwin Kinner in Newport, Rhode Island. A few years later, they welcomed his sister Holly to their family. At an early age, Stewart showed great aptitude for science, math, and music. He loved learning, and at a young age, he got his ham radio license, which sparked a lifelong love for amateur radio, one that I shared with him as well. And Elaine, too, who's also an operator. His call sign from age of 13 was KA3WFE. We used to hear that coming out of the radio. Stewart's family moved frequently due to his father's naval involvement. This included the East Coast, Treasure Island near San Francisco, and eventually returning to Pennsylvania. When he was 16, Stewart's mother, Nancy, became ill and passed away from breast cancer at the age of 38. Her loss devastated him, and he left home and moved to Colorado. As an emancipated miner, he worked at a tree farm, a Christian retreat center, and other odd jobs as he stayed with friends. When he came of age, Stewart joined the Air Force, where he specialized in marksmanship, among other things. And during his extensive training, he met Mary Irwin. They were married in 1977 in Bexar County, Texas. She became pregnant the next year, but sadly their son Sean died a few hours after birth. Stewart and Mary divorced in 1979, but Mary passed away in a car accident a few weeks before it was finalized. Grieving the loss of his son and partner, Stewart was honorably discharged from the Air Force that same year, though he continued to do contract work for the military throughout his life. He moved to Portland, Oregon, where he spent the next number of years in the Pacific Northwest. Around 1984, he moved back to Pennsylvania. He's not that old. He moved back to Pennsylvania, where he met Lynn Eggenbaum. They were married and welcomed their two children, Benjamin and Sarah, into the world. Stewart often talked about his time as a stay-at-home dad when Ben and Sarah were young. He loved being a father and loved them dearly. Unfortunately, Ben and Sarah couldn't make it today, but we're happy to have them join us online. Stewart worked at Orbital Sciences on the East Coast until Lynn and he divorced in 2000. He then moved to Delaware, where he worked for the Delaware State Police as an IT specialist. Stewart was diagnosed with avascular necrosis, AVN, a few years after. AVN is a rare disease that results from a temporary or permanent loss of the blood supply to the bone. When the blood supply is cut off, the bone tissue dies and the bone collapses. And this left Stewart to struggle with chronic pain and limited mobility for the rest of his life. In an online AVN support group, he met Jenny Tarango, and she was a fellow AVN diagnosee with cancer and a cancer survivor. They fell in love, and Stewart moved across the country to Fort Bragg, California, very close to where we are today, to be with her. And Jenny's cancer returned a decade later. He cared for her until Jenny's death in 2017. Many of you here knew Jenny and Stewart as they lived in the Fort Bragg area. Stewart loved it here, and he loved the community which he was heavily involved with. In the recent years, he belonged to a local LDS congregation and had a deep love for its members. Even after moving away and a year ago leaving the LDS church, he always missed the Fort Bragg ward. In June of 2019, at the Fort Bragg ward, Stewart met Rachel Judd, who was in Mendocino area for work. They became best friends and shared a special connection that neither of them could deny. They spent every moment they could together, often talking until the small hours of the morning when they had to leave for work. They got engaged in August and were married in Idaho, December 19, 2019. After Stewart lost his job due to the pandemic, they lived in Idaho for the next 2 years until they received an opportunity to live on the Oregon coast. They lived in the small town of Rockaway Beach in Tillamook County, Oregon, until Stewart passed away from end-stage lung disease on June 3rd of this year. Throughout his life, Stewart pursued many different religious avenues, ranging from Methodist to Mennonite to Mormon, to devoting over 20 years to Western Zen Buddhism. Through his studies, he developed skills in cooking, meditation, beadwork, and working with his hands. Amazing the things that he created over his life. Stewart was an amazing cook, a woodworker, calligrapher, photographer, musician, and much more. He would surprise us occasionally by producing some new skill or knowledge that none of us even knew he had. He was constantly learning new things and loved to have ongoing projects. He was also a gigantic nerd, something I can relate to. If you knew him at all, you knew that Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, Godzilla, the old 50s sci-fi movies were a big part of his everyday life. You know, another side of Stewart was his love of gaming. After discovering that gaming could help distract him from the chronic pain of AVN, he loved to lose himself in games, exploring new worlds and stories. He was a part of an online gaming group that stuck together for years and whom he cared deeply for. In the last months of his life, when lung disease prevented him from leaving bed, he found great solace and friendship in that group. They kept him company through one of the most painful times of his life, even though they didn't know it. Stewart had so many interests and passions that it's difficult to condense into a few minutes. Each of us knew him in our own way at different points in his life. And I'm sad that we only got to join him in the latter part of his life, but we're always grateful that we got to know him and his talents. Each of us holds our own memories of him, but his kind and gentle soul touched us all. After Rachel's remarks, everyone is invited to share their favorite memories of Stewart. And again, we encourage you to share your comments on the chat that we have going. And in the coming months, and we will include them in the video so that we can have the legacy of Stewart live on. Rachel?
Hi, everybody. Just wanted to say thank you for coming. Those of you on the stream, thank you for joining us from wherever you're at. Stewart had friends all over the world. I'm glad we're able to do this so we can share this with everybody. I know that a lot of everybody, his friends, were wondering, this was kind of sudden and didn't even know he was sick. And the short answer is neither did we for a long time. The doctors said that the lung disease was probably working for, a number of years before we even met, and just kind of lying dormant. And then one night, about a year ago, we went to a tree lighting ceremony in Rockaway, the place we lived. And we're sitting next to these two kids who were just hacking and coughing. And we're like, oh, great. We looked at each other and we're like, okay, well, it's fine. Of course, we both got sick, like really sick, like we got the flu. And I got better and he didn't really get better. So the following months was just him, we went through a couple doctors. We tried to figure out what was going on. And we just didn't realize it had progressed quite as much as it had. And after about 7 months of being bedbound, his heart just couldn't take it anymore. And so he had a heart attack and passed away. But during that time, he talked about a lot of things and a lot of people and, kind of took a big look back on his life. And, it was a really difficult time for him. So every time that I miss him, which is multiple times a day, I just have to think and look back and say he's not in pain anymore. He's happy wherever he is, and that he's okay, and he can, go rock climbing and biking and running and everything he used to do before AVN and before the lung disease. So there's way too many memories I have to condense into one. So I'll just kind of share one that happened right at the end. Because of course it did, because he was Stewart. After we had called the ambulance, one morning he had woken up and, he said, hey, something's not right. He couldn't catch his breath. And so we called the ambulance, we got into the hospital. I rushed down there and came in and, the EMTs had put like a oxygen mask over his face. We couldn't really hear him talking. And so we got, him kind of a little more stable, but he was kind of out of it still. And so the doctors kept asking him, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? And he kind of made a gesture and we're like, oh, let's take the mask off. And so we took the mask off and he just goes, and the doctor said, how are you feeling? He's like, with my hands. And I was like, okay. He made me laugh at the very end, even though, things after that didn't quite go the way we had hoped, but he always made me laugh. And so I'll just keep this short and let other people come up here and share the memories of him, because I have way too many to condense into one thing. And yeah, all right, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Stewart was a friend of mine. I met him through my work, helping him and his partner, Jenny. I grew very attached to both of them. Still remember the first time I met him. And he was such a kind, loving, caring person. We formed a bond immediately, and I felt really lucky to get to know Stewart. He was so intelligent and knew so much, and he had so many stories, and it was just like people remarked earlier, you would hear new things and you would go, well, I had no idea you knew anything about that. And I do. I have even though we knew for, what feels like a short time, just maybe 6 years, it felt there was a lot of memories. There's a lot of memories of Stewart in the short time I knew him. Some of the memories were helping transport him and Jenny over to oncology in Ukiah, and having long conversations and learning a lot of stuff. I always felt smarter after talking to Stewart. But while I was talking to him, I felt dumber because he's so smart. But yeah, and it was really good to be there with him in his time of need when he was losing Jenny. He was. I think there was a lot of people that liked Stewart, but it always felt like a little bit like he was alone. A lot of his family lived over on the East Coast, and he had friends. But I really was so happy to be able to be there for him and to help him. We spoke. I went and visited him, right before Jenny passed, and so that was my first real experience with Stewart. We remained close after that, and he actually became a volunteer at our cancer resource center where I work. And so I got to see him a lot more. He'd always come in and all of our computer issues, and he would come and fix them for us. And we really missed him when he left, when he moved away. But he was always so helpful, and it was wonderful when he was lonely before he met Rachel, and I remember he was like a little boy when he finally told me, that they were more than friends, and yeah. So Stewart was really blessed to have Rachel for the last part of his life. His life was, from what he told me, there was a lot of challenges in his life, but he was lucky to have someone with him at the end. And I'm so happy that Rachel and Stewart found each other. I'm so sad that they didn't have more time together. I'm sorry that we all didn't have more time with Stewart. I love Stewart very much. We had him over for Thanksgiving dinner one time, and it was a pleasure to have him. So I know Stewart's watching now, and the thing that comes to my head, I thought what Rachel was going to say about how are you feeling? Stewart always used to tell me, just ducky. And so that's what I thought she was going to say. But I know he's still feeling that way up in heaven right now. He's just ducky. He's probably sad for us that we're missing him. And we love you, Stewart. We love you very much. We miss you.
No, thank you, Jack. I get to hear a lot of extra curricular opinions on Stewart, because what we knew of Stewart was just our family and the great experiences that we had. And I have to say about Stewart that we were closer in age, and he was even older than I am, just a little bit. And so we had kind of this bond. And it's a little embarrassing, but we had kind of a bromance, if you would call it that. and not embarrassing. It was a great blessing in my life. We shared music. We shared common stories of growing up and love for all things sci-fi and fantasy, and so I miss him very much. And I know that all the struggles that he went through in his life made him who he was, because we're all a composite of our experiences, how we handled them, how we didn't handle them, how we learned from them. Um, it just adds to who we are. And whenever our lives end, that's where we stop that progression, I believe, at that point, but are able to continue it. And that we have a future um, with our Father in heaven and our families forever. And I'm so grateful for that. And I know that's true. I felt it with the passing of my father, with um, my mother being on hospice now, and many relatives who have gone on before, and cousins, that I know that I'll see them again. And that gives me a lot of strength, life strength to continue on. So I just wanted to share that feeling of brotherhood that we had, because it was pretty special. It was a unique thing, probably a once in a lifetime thing, where your son-in-law is older than you are. And I learned a lot from him and love him too.
So I have some memories as well. Funny enough, Stewart and I got along really well, even though he was like 9 years older than me. I'd always introduce him as my son-in-law, and then I'd sort of giggle, is that possible? But we did. We got along really well, although half the time I wanted to bonk him over the head, and I think Rachel said the same thing. She said, yeah, half the time I wanted to bonk him over the head too. But some of the things that he and I really bonded over was he was super competitive. Now, if you ask anybody in my family, they'll go, well, yeah, so am I. And so I'm very competitive. And we used to play a game called Canasta, which is a card game. And I think his whole goal with playing Canasta was to beat me. He didn't care who else was at the table, but as long as he beat me, that was okay. So we used to have these long drag out things of playing. So we love doing that. I really bonded over him as well, over genealogy. He had some real questions about his family and who his family was, and so forth. And so I really helped him with trying to find out everything I could about his family, and trying to find pictures and sharing stories. He had a unique situation where he didn't know his grandfather. He didn't know a kin or grandfather. So we tried really hard to figure that out. I don't think we quite figured it out, but I'm hoping he has now. So Stewart, if you're listening, tell me, because I'm curious who your kin or grandfather is. But he just had a love for family, and he wanted to know who was what. He also had a situation in his life where his mother had been adopted, but he also found out that his mother was Jewish. And so that made Stewart half Jewish. So he had that heritage as well, and he didn't find that out until later in life. And so this was just things that he was embracing in his life, and trying to find out truth about his life, because we know it's been talked about already that his life was maybe not the easiest sometimes. And so he was just trying to grasp some peace and some happiness in his life. The other thing we bonded over, oddly enough, he's such a girl sometimes. Rachel and I would always go, he's such a girl. He loved quilts. And so we have a quilt over here to look at, and he made lots of quilts. And I guess he did it all by hand. They were all like done with the Amish and things like that he did them all by hand, which is amazing. And so They got married right at the end of 2019. We all know 2020 was like a crazy year, and everything shut down. So in 2020, I kind of decided to make a quilt for the very first time, and so he was all over that and like loving to watch me make it and how I, learned to do different things. And then I progressed over the next couple of years. And just recently, like maybe 6 months ago, I have to say, it was kind of an amazing quilt. And I made this quilt, and Stewart was like, I'm coming to your house and stealing that. I mean, he was like so all over this quilt. He wanted, and they were supposed to come to our house, I think in May. And so they were going to come, and I said, you can sleep underneath it, but when you leave my house, it will stay in my house. You're not taking it. So he wanted to steal my quilt. So anyway, we bonded over that, and that was kind of fun because he just had so many facets of his life and so many things that he did, which I thought was really cool. Yes, Jamie and Stewart. So yes, when Jamie and Stewart talks about the bromance, not kidding. These two, Rachel and I kept saying to each other, we're like, you know what? When these two run away together, which we just knew they were going to run. We were totally going to go to Europe and go travel. So these two would come, they'd say something and they'd start laughing, and she and I'd go over in the corner and go, so where do you want to go first in Europe? Because we had decided that's what we were going to do. So glad that they had that relationship, and glad that they had that love for each other. Lastly, Stewart loved food. He loved to eat it. He loved to cook it. He loved to look at it. He loved food. And he was a very, 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 very good cook. If you ever had a chance to have him cook anything for you, your mouth was watering by the time you sat at the table, because it was so amazing. So one of the things that he loved a lot was he loved lemon meringue pie. And every year for his birthday, Rachel would make it, or he would make it himself, or whatever. No, he wouldn't make it himself. Oh, Rachel made it, but Rachel never felt like she made it up to his standard. So she would make lemon meringue pie. So we really couldn't bring lemon meringue pie here because it just wasn't going to travel well, and some of the things we made didn't travel well anyway. But in honor of Stewart, on the table back there, we do have some lemon bars that are kind of like that. But anyway, we made those in honor of Stewart because he loved that. But towards the end, Stewart had all kinds of things that he loved. Like he loved, was it one of those orange crunchy things? Cheetos. I hate Cheetos. So those orange crunchy things. And but he had like a Cheeto cake. He kept having to go to the dollar store and get him Cheetos, and so he. And somehow he never gained weight. Totally not fair. But anyway, he loved his food and he loved all that. So anyway, we will miss that kooky little guy. Like I said, we really did get along really well. We talked to these guys probably every day or every couple of days while they were in Rockaway. And so we'll miss him. Okay, so as we end this service, please enjoy some of these sweet treats in honor of him, in hopes that it can help you reminisce about the life of our friend Stewart. We'd like to thank everybody for coming. We want to remind you that we'll leave this open for a little bit so people who are online, go ahead and put their memories in the chat for those who are not here. Thank you so much for coming.